Family members of hostages held in Gaza say the world is waiting on Hamas. The terror group still hasn't agreed to a deal to release their loved ones.
Well, meanwhile, President Biden is demanding Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declare a ceasefire with no mention of the hostages. CBN's Julie Stahl reports from Jerusalem.
President Biden told Univision that Netanyahu's handling of the war is a mistake. He also said Israel should call a ceasefire, but did not link it to the release of the hostages held by Hamas.
What I'm calling for is for the Israelis to just call for a ceasefire, allow for the next 6-8 weeks total access to all food and medicine going into the country.
Despite increasing pressure from its strongest ally, Israel continues its plan for an invasion of Rafah and the destruction of Hamas.
We will complete the elimination of the Hamas battalions, including in Rafah. No force in the world will stop us. There are many forces trying to do this, but it will not help because this enemy, after what it has done, will not do this again.
Netanyahu says Israel has set a date for the invasion. Despite reports that Israel's defense minister said there's no date, CBN News has learned that Yoav Gallant says that date is dependent on both humanitarian and operational preparations. And as world pressure mounts, members of the governing coalition repeat warnings Israel's existence is at stake if it doesn't defeat Hamas.
Our friends from all around the world need to understand that any pressure on the state of Israel to stop the war is actually a pressure for to make Israel sign a suicide pact.
On the legal front, there are accusations that Israel is committing genocide. On Capitol Hill, U.S. Senator Tom Cotton asked Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin about that charge.
I want to address what the protesters raised earlier. Is Israel committing genocide in Gaza?
Senator Cotton, we don't have any evidence of genocide being created.
So that's a no. Israel's not committing genocide in Gaza.
We don't have evidence of that.
Down the street at the White House, family members of American hostages met with Vice President Kamala Harris.
We have heard is that there is a deal on the table right now that all of the parties agree to and are willing to work with. We are waiting now, and the world waits for Hamas to get to yes. It is in their court. There is no reason not to move forward on this deal.
The U.S. also urged Hamas to accept a serious offer on the table, but there are reports Hamas has already rejected that deal. Gil Hoffman, executive director of Honest Reporting, told CBN News with 133 hostages still in captivity, Israelis are praying for a Passover miracle.
We are all praying, and we appreciate the prayers of Christian supporters of Israel around the world for our hostages to come home ahead of the Passover holiday, to be redeemed, to be with their families at the Passover Seder table. We need a miracle, and for that we need prayers.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
We do need a miracle, but we also need to watch what we say and make sure we're making a very clear call. Hamas is the enemy here. They were the ones that launched a horrific attack on October 7th. On October 6th, there was peace. Israel wasn't having anything to do with Gaza. IDF soldiers weren't there. The citizens were obviously under a problem. The surveys show that about 70% of them had what is called now food insecurity, where they didn't know where their next meal was coming from. That's because all of the humanitarian aid that was being poured into Gaza was diverted into rocket attacks and building tunnels. It wasn't there to actually help people in Gaza. So the main problem for the citizens of Gaza is Hamas. The main problem here is Hamas. We have to keep that in mind. The pressure should never be on Israel. They were the victim of the attack, and they have to respond because Hamas has said, we're going to do this again and again and again until there is no more Israel. Let's wake up to that. They're not going to change. They're not going to come to peace. The pressure should be on them because we're at a tipping point for the entire ideology of what is called from the river to the sea. That has been the slogan of the Palestinian cause going all the way back to 1948. So when you hear that, what you're listening to is a call for genocide, a call to end the state of Israel. We can't possibly support that. Israel has a right to exist. The UN created it in 1948. Then the U.S. recognized the modern state of Israel. That's been established international law. So all of these calls that somehow or other there's genocide going on, well, that's from the river to the sea is a very definite call for genocide. It means we're going to kill every single Jew in Israel. When you hear this apartheid state, in Israel, if you're Muslim, you're a full citizen. You have the right to vote. You can freely travel. You can run for office. You can be elected to office. Where the apartheid is, if you're Jewish, you can't possibly walk the street of Ramallah. You can't walk in Gaza. If you do, you would be killed. So let's be clear. And say the real problem here is this ideology. The real problem is Hamas. And any call for Israel to have a unilateral ceasefire is just giving aid and comfort to Hamas. This ideology can't stand. They need to understand, no, the world stands with Israel. We stand with Israel. Now, our current president, there's a Yiddish proverb, you can't dance at two weddings. He's trying to dance at two weddings. He's trying to hold on to political hope in Michigan at the same time solve an international crisis. You can't do both. You have to be clear and clear in your messaging so that Hamas gets the message. You can't survive this. What you did on October 7th is beyond any kind of peace negotiation. You have to unconditionally surrender. You have to release the hostages. You have to lay down your arms, and you have to stop attacking Israel. Well, in other news, an Arizona State Supreme Court decision is putting Donald Trump's position on abortion in the spotlight. Ephraim Graham has that story and more from the CBN newsroom. Ephraim?
Gordon, Tuesday, the Arizona High Court upheld a 160-year-old measure outlawing abortion except when the mother's life is in danger. That ruling is fanning the flames of the abortion debate. President Biden condemned the measure as cruel, and Vice President Kamala Harris is heading to Arizona Friday to campaign on the issue. The court's decision came just one day after former President Donald Trump declared abortion should be left up to the states. It's a position that's angered some of his strongest supporters. CBN's Brody Carter has more now on that uproar.
Donald Trump says his decision basically follows the Supreme Court's decision to give the authority regarding abortion back to the states. While Trump maintains this is mainly about winning in November, those pro-life groups taking offense say the former president sounds more like a pro-choice candidate.
My view is now that we have abortion where everybody wanted it from a legal standpoint, the states will determine by vote or legislation or perhaps both, and whatever they decide must be the law of the land, in this case, the law of the state.
And that was enough to spark controversy within the party on this volatile issue, because Trump stayed away from supporting any federal ban in favor of the states.
I think people need to be very careful about the snake in the grass.
Former Planned Parenthood director Abby Johnson, now a pro-life advocate, believes the former president is abandoning pro-life politics, comparing his words to those who support abortion.
If women want to murder their babies, that's up to them. That's between them and their families, which is exactly what he said.
Do what's right for your family and do what's right for yourself. Do what's right for your children. At the end of the day, it's all about will of the people. That's where we are right now, and that's what we want.
Mike Pence called his former boss's decision a slap in the face to millions of pro-life Americans who voted for him.
Because the truth is that this isn't a states' rights issue, this is a human rights issue. And regardless of whether you're born in Texas or California, you have human rights.
Kelsey Pritchard of the Susan B. Anthony list tells CBN News they're disappointed Trump didn't specifically call for protections on babies in the womb after 15 weeks.
I think it was a misstep for President Trump to take this position yesterday. At the same time, we recognize completely that President Trump was the most pro-life president that we've ever had.
As the presidential election draws near, Trump is taking the stance that abortion bans are not popular with voters. Since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, 7 states have held ballot initiatives, and the pro-life movement is yet to win. In November, Florida and possibly other states will put abortion to a vote.
What we're seeing is general election Donald Trump.
Publisher of Inside Elections and CBN News contributor Nathan Gonzalez told CBN's Faith Nation Trump is reaching outside the Republican base for votes.
This is a position that he believes he needs to take in order to succeed and get elected to another term, and we're seeing the consequences of trying to play it both sides of the issue.
Since the decision to give authority on abortion is now back in the state courts, more candidates will have to play politics on the issue. Gonzalez points out the Arizona State Supreme Court's decision Tuesday, approving a 160-year-old measure banning almost all abortions, put one Arizona representative in a squeeze.
I'll give you one specific example. Congressman Juan Ciscomani of Arizona. When the Dobbs decision came down, he said it was a historic day. He was kind of celebrating with the rest of the Republican Party of the pro-life movement. When this Arizona Supreme Court decision came at the states' rights issue, he said it was a disaster because he is trying to win re-election in a competitive congressional district, and he realizes that while the traditionally pro-life position might be the best moral position, it is not a politically popular decision.
It's a dilemma the Republican Party is struggling to address, and its candidates will have to carefully navigate as the 2024 election season goes forward. Brody Carter, CBN News.
I want to turn now to national security and an alleged terror plot here at home. An Idaho man is facing federal terrorism charges. Agents say he was going to attack churches in his hometown of Coeur d'Alene. The FBI says it arrested Alexander Mercurio just hours before he planned to kill churchgoers and set fire to their buildings. The complaint says the 18-year-old, believed to be an ISIS sympathizer, told an informant he was going to harm his father and then steal his weapons, then go from church to church Sunday morning, killing as many people as possible until he was killed. Yesterday, FBI Director Christopher Wray warned of the increasing threat of terror attacks in the United States.
And while we continue to be concerned about individuals or small groups drawing some kind of twisted inspiration from the events in the Middle East to carry out attacks here at home, the foreign terrorist threat and the potential for a coordinated attack here in the homeland, like the ISIS-K attack we saw at the Russia concert hall just a couple weeks ago, is now increasingly concerning.
The Idaho suspect is awaiting a court date and could face up to 20 years in prison if convicted. Extremely troubling, Gordon.
It is extremely troubling, and I hope our leadership and the leadership of the world seizes these moments to stand up to say this kind of action is horrific. It has no place in our world today. Whether it's an attack in Moscow, ISIS-K, what ISIS did in northern Iraq and how long it took us to recognize they were specifically targeting religious minorities to wipe them out. They were destroying churches. They were crucifying Christians. The beheading of Christians on a beach in Egypt. You look at these things and go, can we not just clearly call it for what it is? This is the face of evil. And that evil was so clear on October 7th. Can we not have a moral clarity that we need to stand against this and this ideology that somehow or other you're going to do God a favor by killing other people? Are you out of your mind? That should never exist. It should never be applauded. Here is the problem, though. These terrorists, these radical Muslims, have people somehow cowed into fear. Here, let me underline what happened in Israel about 30 years ago. Yahya Sinwar, he killed 4 Palestinians. What was the reason behind it? They had deals with Israeli Jews. That was their crime. He killed them. He was tried in an Israeli court and found guilty of murder. He spent 20 years in jail there. What did he do? Well, he learned how to speak Hebrew fluently. And then there was a prisoner exchange. There was a hostage taken in Gaza, and he was one of the prisoners given up by Israel. And what does he do now? Well, he goes on a killing rampage. Let's have the clarity to say this should never happen. These people shouldn't be free. We need to stand up to it because it's an absolute evil. Let's call it for what it is.